Hello, everybody. Have some people hop on here. Hey, everybody, thanks for hopping in. Should be a fun night. So, welcome to this is the 15th episode of the Urban Bourbon Hour. As always, I'm Chris, the Urban Bourbonist, coming to you live from the Urban Bourbon Bunker here in Chicago, Illinois. This should be a very fun evening. My guest will be Gregg Snyder. He is the master distiller at Chicken Cock Whiskey. The guy has had just an amazing career in the industry. So it'll be interesting to learn a bit about him before we get into the brand and everything that they're doing, because he's a really interesting guy. Really cool brand that's being revived. It dates all the way back to I think 1856. The brand was originally started in Kentucky. So we're just waiting for Gregg to join us here, and then we'll get into this and talk to him and hopefully learn a lot from him and learn a lot about this brand, Chicken Cock Whiskey, and also drink a little Chicken Cock Whiskey. So they graciously sent me their bourbon. This is their Kentucky Straight Bourbon. They also very graciously sent me a bottle of their Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Rye. So it will be very fun to talk about those with Gregg. Coming on, connecting is Gregg Snyder. Gregg!
Hey,
How's it going?
well, a little difficult navigating, but I think I finally
That's okay.
the request wasn't showing up.
Oh, what
So
was it?
no.
Yeah, sometimes this Instagram can be a little funky, and I don't know. So anyway, we got you on. That's good. Good to have you here. I want to thank you very much for agreeing to come on and to do this and to just kind of chat here and tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about Chicken Cock. So thank you very much for agreeing to come on.
Well, absolutely, my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, let's start with Chicken Cock.
Okay,
You know,
let's go there.
it's an old brand that originated in 1856, actually, in Paris, Kentucky. And you know, it's interesting. A lot of people. I do a number of tastings, mostly in the southeast of the country, and people say, "Man, where'd you get that name?" You know, they just think it's such a. And you know, I said, you know, I didn't make it up. I mean, it's an old brand, as I said, originated in Paris, Kentucky in 1856, and back at that time, they called a male chicken a cock.
Yeah.
That's right, just like South Carolina gamecock. So you know, it's just. But a lot of people have a lot of fun with it, the name, and I think it's hilarious. But
yeah, it's a good attention grabber.
It is indeed. It is indeed. But I'm delighted to be associated with the brand and give you a little more history about it. It was a great brand. A gentleman by the name James A. Miller actually built the distillery in Paris, Kentucky, and started the brand, as I said, in 1856. Well, several years after running the distillery and growing the brand, he passed away. And one of his clerks, a gentleman by the name of George White, was very loyal to Mr. Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mr. Miller actually left him a couple $1,000s. Well, that wasn't enough to buy the distillery, so he picked up a couple of partners, and together they acquired the distillery and kept the brand alive. And there's a lot of old bottles. Have you ever heard of the Oscar Getz Museum down in Bardstown, Kentucky?
Yes. They have like a lot of the history of a lot of brands there, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, it has the whole history of the bourbon industry there, and it's kind of neat. But they have a lot of the old bottles, and they have a bunch of the old chicken cock bottles, pre-prohibition bottles.
Very cool.
And there's one they've got down there that Mr. White actually bottled as a tribute to Mr. Miller, and it said the famous old brand J.A. Miller Chicken Cock Whiskey. And
so cool.
So it's kind of neat to see some of that old history in that. But you know, the brand did extremely well up to Prohibition days. And then when Prohibition came along, like most distilleries, they had to shut down. They couldn't afford the medicinal alcohol permits.
Yeah.
And so the distillery shut down, and they sold the brand to a company up in Montreal, Canada. And basically that company actually made rye whiskey. And so they started putting rye whiskey in the bottle under the Chicken Cock name. And it was a little bit unique. They bottle it, and then they put it in a tin can. Well, that tin can actually helped protect that bottle as it was being bootlegged across the border back in the United States.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Chicken Cock showed up at a lot of speakeasies, and part of Chicken Cock's claim to fame was during Prohibition, it was actually the house whiskey at the Cotton Club, which
I read that. Yeah,
which is probably one of the most famous of the speakeasies during that era.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
post the end of Prohibition, National Distillers actually acquired the brand. A subsidiary of theirs that had a medicinal alcohol permit, and they reacquired the brand, started the distillery back up in Paris, and they actually produced medicinal alcohol prior to Prohibition ending. And then, of course, shortly thereafter, Prohibition was repealed. The brand came back alive and did well up until around the 1950s. The distillery actually burnt down. And at that time, the company decided not to rebuild it. So the brand sat idle for many, many years. And then around 2012, the founder of Grain and Barrel Spirits, Matti Antila, he actually acquired the brand. And he had a vision to resurrect it back to Kentucky. Now, like most new brands, most new companies in the bourbon boom today, the business strategy is you got to get cash flow quick.
Yeah.
So they started out bottling some very young whiskey, and it did all right. We don't produce it anymore, but it served its purpose. It created some cash flow to where we could go ahead and the company could actually acquire some higher quality product and then start making whiskey for the future. And long about 2017, I've been in the business, in the spirits business, 42 years now, Chris.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I want to talk about this. I don't want to cut you off from you telling this story, but I do want to get to your resume and your history in the industry, because it's quite interesting. So go on, please continue like you were going to say.
Yeah, so anyhow, I decided to get out of the corporate rat race and ramp up my retirement plan, and that was not to retire, but kind of start my own consulting company and share some of those years of experience and knowledge that I possessed and was able to pick up. And so in consulting, Grain and Barrel Spirits was actually one of the first customers or clients I picked up. And, Matti was looking for some assistance to help with the supply chain, but also to help resurrect the brand back to Kentucky. And so basically part of what I did is I helped them negotiate a contract with Bardstown Bourbon Company.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Bardstown Bourbon Company, Chris?
Yes, very much so. I've been there, visited. Big fan of what they're doing and all the distilling they're doing for guys like you and a bunch of other brands as well.
Right. It's a beautiful place, and they've got a great collaborative distillation program. Steve Nally, their master distiller, and Steve and I go way back. He's one of the few guys in this industry, still active in this industry. They have a couple more years in it than I do, but Steve's been a dear friend for many, many years, and what I was doing prior to getting into consulting, that's actually when I first connected with the Bardstown Bourbon Company and negotiated a contract for another company.
Okay.
But so anyhow, Matti decided, we want to kind of collaborate with these guys, and so the program's great. Basically, I gave them our mash bill. Our current mash bill for Chicken Cock whiskey is 70% corn, 21% rye, and 9% malted barley.
Okay.
It's a little higher rye recipe. And then I also gave them, basically the cooking procedures, the time and temperatures, all the fermentation and distillation specifications. And then likewise, I select the barrels.
Okay, all right.
So anyhow, basically we use their employees and their equipment. And then when it's time to make our bourbon, I go down and kind of oversee the process to make sure that they're following the specifications right. And great group of people. They do a fantastic job, and they're making some wonderful whiskey.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, they have such a great reputation, I think, in the industry and amongst like people like me, people who are consumers and drinking all the whiskey that's being put out. So I know that they're very highly regarded. I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned about that collaboration. So you had said when they go to create your mash bill, which you've already given to them, but when they go to actually create the whiskey, you're there kind of overseeing the operation as they're producing your whiskey.
Yeah, initially it takes about 3 days to produce our whiskey, so I'm not there for 72 hours straight.
Yeah.
But I am there at the beginning of it to make sure they get the first few batches lined out right. You know, they have so many. They've got a select group of customers, but those select group of customers have numerous mash bills. Most of them do,
Yeah, yeah,
and
they,
it's unbelievable the number of different mash bills that they're producing. So it can get confusing to the operator sometime. But they actually, part of what I helped provide was work instructions that actually follows each step and what to do next. And like I said, time and temperatures for cooking and so forth.
yeah.
And so if you're there to make sure they get on the right track, I think that's the key thing. You know, it is a 72-hour fermentation.
Hmm.
And so once they pretty much get the fermenter set, it's pretty much, you know, automatic from there.
Yeah,
You know,
it's good to go from there.
likewise, they send me beer chemistry. Once it's all produced and distilled, I get all of the beer chemistry and kind of track to see if there's anything we need to tweak to do a little bit better next time. But they've been spot on so far. They've done a great job.
That's amazing. So how up until this point, um, are they laying down product for you once a year, twice a year? Like how does it work? Or
Yeah,
what kind of
basically,
contract do you have?
yeah. So we started out the first 600 plus barrels they made for us, Chris, was in August of 2018.
Okay.
Okay. And so the next batch, the next 600 barrels, and again, it's kind of an annual production,
Okay.
was produced in February of last year, 2019. And we just finished another 600 barrels here about 3 weeks ago,
Oh,
roughly
all right.
2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So we basically got 3 runs sitting in the warehouse now and you know, aging.
Yeah.
Now,
And
I
do you age them all at BBC as well? That's part of
yes,
the collaboration. Yeah.
exactly. They're in their warehouses, and those folks are great to work with. We've been able to pretty much cherry pick where we want them aged in the warehouse, and again through experience and knowledge, I've got a pretty good idea what I've experienced anyway is the best
Yeah.
locations.
Um, and so each time that they do a run for you, so each of these times, do you show up each time at the beginning of the run to just make sure they've got it? So you've been there all three times and kind of
Absolutely,
okay, very cool. All right,
absolutely,
yeah, yeah.
right, right.
It's interesting to hear this from you because I've never had anyone on the show that has like the type of experience that you have and also that collaboration with Bardstown. So you're the first person I've talked to about it. So it's interesting to learn about it. Like, so you're the master distiller of Chicken Cock, and it's just interesting to hear how then you actually oversee the process when it's being contract distilled for you. So thank you for sharing that. It's really cool. Um, but I want to kind of back things up a little bit further, Greg, and I really do want to talk to you about kind of your career because I think it would be so interesting for the people that are tuning in here tonight. I mean, like we said at the top, you've been in the distilled spirits kind of operations for over 40 years, and you've been in like the industry as a whole for like 6 decades, which is incredible. Can you kind of tell us like what led you to get into the distilled spirits world? Like I see that you went to University of Indiana University. Cheers to the Big Ten, and I'm a Big Ten guy as well. University of Illinois, and you have an MBA from Bellarmine University. So how did that lead you into distilled spirits?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people ask me that. Well, how do you get started in the industry? And for me, it was, it was just a stroke of luck. Again, I went to Indiana University and have a business degree. And, your senior year, basically the career placement reaches out to different companies who are looking to hire. And they post interviews when companies were coming to the university to interview graduating seniors. I'd sign up for certain ones, and yeah. Joseph E. Seagram, actually, back then they had a plant in Louisville, Kentucky, and they were coming over to interview graduates to potentially hire supervisors. And so basically I signed up, got an interview, and next thing you know, I got a job offer. So again, just kind of a stroke of luck, and I've loved every minute of it, and it does. It literally gets in your blood. It's something that you get very passionate about, and the beauty of it was this was in 1978. I was right out of college, 21 years old, and Seagram's had a great program at that time. If you wanted to learn and you were aggressive and pick things up quick and you performed well, they had a fast track program where they would try to get you around and give you as much exposure to every element of the operation. And so basically I was fortunate enough to fall into that program. And I literally worked in the distillery, the dry house, in the barrel warehouse, filling barrels, entering barrels, withdrawing barrels, dumping barrels, blending, processing, bottling, shipping, receiving, quality, maintenance.
Literally
everything. Every operational department at that facility, I was fortunate enough to work in it, and it gave me a good overall exposure to the entire operation.
Wow, that's amazing. So you started off at Seagram's. I didn't know that they had that facility in Louisville. Of course, everyone is familiar with what is now MGP Products, which is an old Seagram's facility in Indiana. But so you went from Seagram's to like Brown-Forman after that, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, the Seagram's actually consolidated. They shut down the Louisville plant and consolidated those operations actually up to the Lawrenceburg, Indiana plant. Moved all the bottling and all the production operations to the Lawrenceburg. I had an opportunity to relocate with them, and I actually would have been up at that plant. I would have been overseeing. They had a barrel warehouse operation in Shannon, Ohio. And they told me I'd be there about 9 to 12 months, and then they were going to move me to New York City to the corporate offices, and that wasn't in my game plan at the time. No. So I said, that's all I need to know. I'm gonna accept the severance package, and that's actually when I went back and got my MBA in a year's time, and they paid for every penny of it.
Oh wow!
So yeah, it worked out pretty well. So yeah, shortly thereafter, I went to work for Brown-Forman. And again, it was a great company to work for. I've been blessed my entire career to work for some great companies and with some great people that were willing to share their knowledge and experience. So,
so you were heavily involved, I think, that I read or had heard somewhere else at Brown-Forman with their cooperage there, correct?
That's right. I started out managing their bottling operation on the afternoon shift, and then I got promoted to all the dry goods. I was responsible for all the dry materials coming in for the bottling operation, and then I added to that all the wet goods. So anything like Canadian Mists, tankers coming from Canada, or tequila coming from Mexico, or the early times warehouse, I had responsibility for all that in addition to the dry goods. But then I got a promotion, and they asked me to go out to bluegrass cooperage, which now it's called Brown-Forman cooperage, but back then it was called bluegrass cooperage. And of course, Brown-Forman is the only distilling company that actually makes their own barrels.
Yeah.
Back then, though, we were actually making barrels for everybody in the industry. There were really two primary players. Bluegrass, we had about 50% of the business, and a company called Independent Stave Company had the other 50%. And so yeah, it was kind of a duopoly back in those days. But yeah, I went out there as director of operations, and again, it was funny because so many people, all my friends said, "Man, why do you want to go out there that hellhole? It's like walking back in the 18th century. You know, it's hot, it's dirty, it's smoky. You know, it's dangerous."
Yeah.
And I said, you know, that's one of the most important elements to making great bourbon whiskey, and that's something I hadn't had a chance to learn yet. So yeah, I went out there and I was responsible for the operations for about 9 years.
That's amazing. And I find it fascinating that like you are thinking at the time, like you're interested in how the barrel affects the liquid, but yet you hadn't learned it yet. So that's like part of your motivation to take that job. That's really, really cool. I mean, you're so curious about it, like, hey, I'm going to take over that operation because I need to know as much as I can about the barrels. That's awesome. That's really, really
Yeah,
cool.
you know, actually, it's interesting. A lot of people don't realize it, but 60 to 70% of the flavor in a finished bottle of bourbon whiskey actually comes from the white oak barrel.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's a critical element. You know, a lot of people think, well, it's just a container that, you know, gives it some color and maybe a little bit of flavor, but it's to make a great bourbon whiskey, it's the most critical.
So I kind of want to stay on this barrel topic because it's fascinating to me too. And since you know so much about it, and you said that you're selecting the barrels for all the new make that is being done at Bardstown. Are you selecting like barrels through someone they have a relationship with, or are you just as Chicken Cock Whiskey doing your own thing outside of Bardstown when it comes to the barrels?
So great question. So for the first two batches, I actually used a cooperage that I'm quite familiar with and know their process, know, you know, what they do to do it right to make a good quality barrel.
Yeah.
And so I selected those barrels initially. Now, getting back to my consulting business, about the time I started, like I think July of 2017, when I actually started my consulting business, in addition to grain and barrel spirits, I picked up another client, and it was a group out in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia.
Okay.
They were interested in building a cooperage. With the bourbon boom taking off, you know, they felt that there might be a need for barrels. And so that's the first thing they asked me to do, was conduct a market feasibility study. And so I just focused on the state of Kentucky. And in Kentucky, you know, Kentucky represents about 95% of the bourbon market. So I figured I could get good information. You can go to Frankfurt, since there's property taxes, ad valorem taxes paid on barrels.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's basically, you can get those tax records to see how many barrels people are actually putting away, how many, you know, different companies, what they're laying down, what they have in inventory, and so forth. And then you look at all the money. I mean, I'm talking billions of dollars that distilleries were spending to expand this distillation capacity, to expand warehouses, and then the boom with all the craft distillers coming on board. It was great to see. And I've seen it bottom out, the industry bottom out, you know, when getting into it in the late 70s and 80s, it kind of flattened out, and now to see a boom again, it's great. So anyhow, these guys decided to start their own company. It's called West Virginia Great Barrel Company, and they just recently, here in the past, well, they started making barrels the end of February.
Okay.
Now, with that relationship, I actually went out there and helped them get their stave mill started. You know, to make barrels, you got to have a supply of white oak.
Yeah.
And they're right there in the heart of Appalachian Mountains, and they've got an abundance of white oak and have great access to it. So West Virginia is one of the areas. When I worked at Bluegrass Cooperage, I found that some of the ideal, to me, the top quality oak was either coming out of the Minnesota or Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin area, or in West Virginia. Now, up north in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area, you know, you got cold temperatures. You have very short summers. And so by nature, because of that climate, the white oak grows very slow.
Yeah.
By growing slow, you get a very concentrated, tight grain oak. When I say tight grain, the annual growth rings are very tight. The same thing I found in West Virginia. Now, it's not so much the temperatures as it is the mountainous area, the elevations, and the rough and rocky soil. You know,
Yeah.
those mountains, you got about 50% of the trees are facing the north. The other 50% are facing the south. So the south trees are getting more sunlight than the north. But in addition, that rough and rocky soil just promotes real slow growth. So you have an extremely high percentage of tight grain oak.
Oh,
Now, when I say tight grain, by standard, 10 annual growth rings per inch is considered tight grain.
okay.
The white oak they're harvesting out in West Virginia area, it's averaging probably somewhere between 12 to 15 annual
Wow.
growth rates per inch. So why is that important? Okay, well, it's important because of the chemical composition within that white oak. You know, one of the reasons white oak is used, first off, white oak contains tyloses. Tyloses is a substance, it's actually the lining of some of the cellular structure. And when that tree is stressed or actually cut, it collapses and it clogs the cells.
Mm.
Okay, so that when you quarter saw it, it won't leak.
Huh.
White oak or other species of wood don't contain tyloses. You can quarter saw red oak and you make a barrel out of it and it won't hold a drop.
Yeah.
Go right through, right. But white oak is unique in that regard. The other element of white oak that makes it important for whiskey maturation is the components. You know, other than oak lactones and some of the other phenolic compounds that you want to impart in your flavors of your whiskey, it contains cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. Now, cellulose is the cellular structure that makes white oak hard and strong and keeps it all together.
Uh-huh.
Hemicellulose is where the polysaccharides exist, the wood sugars.
So the sugar, yeah, the sugar, yeah.
And so it's just like, you know, chemistry 101. You took a spoonful of sugar and you held it over a Bunsen burner. What did that sugar do? That sugar melted
Yeah.
and caramelized on you. And so that's where you get in the caramelized substance, the caramel flavors in whiskey. Likewise with the lignin. When you heat up, you build that barrel and you heat it up, the lignin converts into vanillin. And that's where you get the
Yeah.
so the caramel and vanilla flavors are the two primary elements that you're getting from the hemicellulose and lignin. So again, now with the tight grain oak, you have extremely much denser, much heavier concentrated of those components, the hemicellulose and lignin. You know, you look at a barrel, the circumference of a barrel is standard 53-gallon barrel is 81 inches in circumference. Okay, so say it's on the low side, say it's 12 annual rings per inch. Okay, that's over 960 years of growth
Around the barrel, yeah.
One barrel. And so you can imagine the density of the desirable chemical compound in the hemicellulose and lignin when you toast that barrel properly. Now, some cooperages nowadays, they just char the barrel. It's a lot easier, a lot cheaper, and unfortunately, a lot of the distilleries, especially the bigger ones, you know, it's all about price. You know, they may talk quality, but they're more focused on price, and it is. I mean, you pay 10, you know, say you're going to fill 200,000 barrels a year or more. You know, you take a Jim Beam, they're filling over 500,000 barrels a year.
Yeah, right.
Well, $10 a barrel difference, that's, you know, that's $10 million.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, so again, rightfully so. They're focused more probably on price than others. But the great thing, I think, with the bourbon boom, so many people are much more educated nowadays, and those that are really striving to reach quality, understand the importance of that barrel.
So you're a fan of toasting then, the barrel?
Absolutely, absolutely. What you want to do in the toasting, you know, if you just char that barrel, by setting it on fire, you're going to get a real thin layer. They call it a red layer, just on the inside of that char. But by toasting it and heating it up and giving the proper time and temperature, you're creating, you know, making those conversions of the hemicellulose and lignin into the caramel and vanilla flavors, and you're driving it deeper into the wood. When that whiskey soaks into that barrel, it goes in about halfway into that stave.
Mm-hmm.
And so the deeper you can drive that, the more flavor you're creating
Yeah.
to impart to your whiskey. The charring, again, I believe personally, I like a number 3 level char. Okay, there's 4 levels of char,
Yep.
4 being the heaviest.
Mm-hmm.
You're creating all these great flavors. The last thing you want to do is burn them away.
Right.
Okay. So by driving it deep into the wood, then when you char it, you're doing what you want to. You want to fracture and blister that surface. And the charring actually creates a charcoal filter.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, well, that's where it gets its color and a lot of its flavor. Well, it does get a little bit of color, but the primary purpose of the charring is charcoal filter.
Yeah. Kind of remove all the bad things that you don't want to come out in the end, right?
Somewhat, but if you taste whiskey right off the still, what do you taste? You taste that corn, and you taste that rye or wheat. You taste that malted barley. You can really taste the grains. And so, through the maturation, through the heat of the summer and the cold of the winter, that whiskey's expanding into the wood during the hot days and then coming back out in the colder days. And it's just that movement in and out of the wood. So when it passes through that char layer, that charcoal filtering strips out that graininess, and then it picks up those sweeter caramel and vanilla notes. And then when it extracts back out, that's what you're doing through the maturation. They call it mellowing. That's all a part of that process.
That's amazing.
So it is. It like I said, there's a lot to it that a lot more than people really understand. But to make a quality product, now, don't get me wrong. Whiskey going in the barrel, as I've said numerous times, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, right?
Yeah, right.
And so the whiskey going in the barrel has to be good. If that whiskey's not good going in the barrel, it's not going to be good coming out.
Right. The barrel can only do so much of the work.
It can indeed. And it can do. If you put a good whiskey in there, into a good barrel, it can come out great if you do it right. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that was just a master class in barrel science. That was truly incredible. I mean, and then for you to have this relationship, with these people who are wanting to start a cooperage, and then so you're able to go there, you have a relationship with them, and then you're picking the specific then staves that are going into your barrels for this most recent batch that you did at BBC?
Exactly, Chris. Yeah. So I was out there when they started the stave mill. They have a stave mill. It's called Audrina Stave Mill. It's right outside of Union, West Virginia, about 25 miles from the cooperage, where the cooperage is located. And it's ideal. I mean, it sits in a valley in between these two mountain ranges, and it's a constant wind tunnel.
Oh.
So it's ideal for natural air drying wood, okay, which is another key element we'll talk about here in a second. But I was out there the first week of last March, training their employees, showing them how to quarter saw, how to grade the staves and the heading, what to edge off, what to keep, how to stack the wood, and so forth. And then I went back out a month later, the first week of April, and did some more training with some new employees, and just kind of did some observations, see how fast they were, moving up the learning curve, and they did quite well actually. But and then the first week of May, I went back out there representing Grain and Barrel Spirits. So Monty asked me to be their master distiller, and as part of that role, I actually went out there with the knowledge and experience that I've been able to obtain over the years, and I actually looked through roughly 500 logs and called out the ones that I felt didn't meet the specifications for tight grain, or they may have had some other defects or whatever. But I had a spray paint can, and I'd actually marked the ends of the logs, the ones that I called out.
This is great.
And so they set those aside, and we actually ran those logs. I was there for a week overseeing the quarter sawing of those staves and heading, and then they sat out there in the stave yard, air drying in that natural wind tunnel from May till, I guess it was about January, February, I think, when they actually brought them into the cooperage. And so they had a good, 9-10 months worth of air drying. And natural air drying is another key element. A lot of barrels today, they cut a white oak log, they quarter saw it, they stack it, they send it in, they run it through a pre-dryer and get the moisture content down to about 20%,
and they'll put it in a kiln and finish drying it down to the 9 to 14% that it needs to be to where you can machine it clean without tearing it, the wood. Natural air drying is important for the flavor of the whiskey. Now, the barrels at West Virginia Great Barrel Company, they have a minimum standard of at least 6 months. Okay. But again, our barrel, our staves and heading were air dried for roughly 10 months. Now, when the natural air drying takes place, you know, they're just sitting out there, and you want the rain, you want the snow, you want the wind and the heat and the cold. You want all those elements exposed to that wood. And what it does, it starts growing a fungus on the outside of that wood. Now, people say, oh, that's not good. No, that's great. You want that microbial activity, because what it does, it starts degrading the wood, the cellular structure of the wood. And what it does, it opens up those cells so that when it rains and all these wind and so forth, it leaches out the harsher tannins and some of the other undesirable phenolic compounds that you don't want to impart in the flavor of your whiskey.
Wow. And
so that's a real important part, again, to making a good quality whiskey. Likewise, through that degradation of the wood and opening up the cellular structure, when you put that wood into a barrel now, and since it's so tight grained, now that heat has better access to the hemicellulose and lignin. So, you know, all that process, it's important to the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, again, this has just been a masterclass on barrel science. Let me ask you this. So those barrels, which you selected the staves for those barrels, do you number the batches at BBC? Because I want some of this batch 3 that's coming out with the staves that have been hand-selected by you. I mean, come on.
Well, what we did to finish that process, Chris, what was it, March 16th is when they started building those 600 barrels. And so I went back out to the cooperage. We actually did some video on that. Hopefully we'll be able to share some of that. It's a cool process. And if you're ever around White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, their visitor center isn't up and running yet, but I'm hoping later this summer they'll have that running. It's a neat operation to see. But so yeah, I was there that week spent the week of March 16th out there, actually 4 days, overseeing the production of those barrels, ensuring that they were getting toasted properly, ensuring they were getting charred properly, and the overall construction. And then the 20th of March, I drove back the night of the March 19th. On the 20th of March, I was back down in Bardstown, and that's when we started mashing the next 600 barrels of bourbon.
All right.
And so the following week, those barrels actually were filled at Bardstown and put on the 5th floor of their newest warehouse.
That's so great. I mean, that's amazing. Like, from literally picking out the logs and then the staves to then filling them with the distillate that's really truly incredible.
It's one of the things we're trying to do. I think I'm not aware of any other distillery, any other brand that is doing it or has the capability or experience to do that, quite honestly.
Right, exactly.
And so it's something unique to Chicken Cock whiskey. And again, I'm excited. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity because, you know, I've worked in a lot of different disciplines during my career, and to finally have an opportunity to take a lot of that experience and years of experience and knowledge and being able to utilize it and focus it all on one brand from start to finish it's thrilling to me.
Yeah, and I don't want to sell short your resume and your history, because we haven't barely even scratched the surface of like what you've done. I mean, you were at that cooperage, which now that just turned into such a great conversation about barrels. And then you went from there. You were at one point you were at Austin Nichols Wild Turkey. Then you were at another like large distiller out east called White Rock, and then Jim Beam, and like all these amazing places and like huge players in the distilling world.
Yeah, you know, I'm a believer things happen for a reason. And, you know, again, I've been very blessed and very fortunate throughout my career to be in the right spot at the right time sometimes. And maybe not in the right spot at the right time other times, but you got to make the best of it. And so, yeah, I had an opportunity when I was at Brown Forman I had a recruiter call me. I usually didn't talk to recruiters, but there was a time period there when I thought, I'll listen to what they have to say. And they were looking for a managing director at Wild Turkey. At the time, it was owned by Pernod Ricard. And so I listened to the recruiter. I took, accepted the interview and got a job, got hired as a managing director at Wild Turkey. So I was at Wild Turkey a little over 10 years. Of the 42 years I've been in the business. So, but there again, it was fun. Had the opportunity to work with one of the great guys in Jimmy Russell. Jimmy's the last of what I consider the true master distillers. There was really during my tenure, during my career, the four guys that I really respected and thought the world of, I call them the four horsemen, but you had Jimmy Russell, who's the only one still surviving, but Booker Noe, who was a dear friend of mine, Elmer T. Lee, again, another dear friend of mine, and Parker Beam. And those four guys, to me, they grew up with corn dust under their fingernails. They actually made the whiskey. They're true master distillers. And in today's society, in today's industry, that term master distiller gets used a little bit too loosely, unfortunately. But those are the guys that I looked up to and learned so much from just being around them.
I mean, those are just legendary names that you just named off. I mean, anyone that's a whiskey fan or consumer, like, if you mention those names, they know who they are, and you were friends with them, that's wild. I mean, that is really, really cool.
Well, it's interesting, Chris. This industry, and I guess part of what I love about this industry is that, the sales and marketing side can be pretty cutthroat sometimes. They can be pretty competitive. But even though on the production side, even though we're competitors, there's a brotherhood.
Yeah.
And any time during my career, whether I worked for Seagram's or Brown Forman or Wild Turkey, whoever, if we had a motor burnout, say in distillery or bottling operation, and we didn't have a spare, I could call up any of them.
Yeah.
And if they had that motor, they'd throw it in the truck and run it over, vice versa. We go pick it up, or, a drum of label glue or whatever. I mean, we took care of each other. And, we respected the competition, but again, it's a brotherhood, and that's part of the beauty of the industry.
Yeah. And I mean, you even look at like when Heaven Hill had their fire, and how everyone kind of in the industry pitched in to try and get that fire out as quickly as possible, but then to help them actually provide them with product and help them get back to Heaven Hill again while they were dealing with all that is just an incredible story, of how the industry works that way.
That's a great example. Yep.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. But Greg, I want before you go, I want to talk to you about the whiskeys that you guys so graciously sent me. And these are the two that are now, I think these are going to be kind of like the flagships, or like kind of like the staple product line. So we have
That's correct.
We have the Kentucky Straight Bourbon and then the Kentucky Straight Rye. Let's talk about the bourbon first, as I imagine this is going to be like a really, this is when people see chicken cock, this is kind of going to be like the flagship product, I would imagine.
That's correct. That's correct. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say there's not an age statement on this, so we know it's at least 4 years old, but I think I heard that this has even some quite older whiskey in this bottle.
It does indeed. As you mentioned, Chris, that's going to be our flagship brand going forward. And then the product we laid down at Bardstown Bourbon Company, the August of 2018, we plan to bottle some of that when it's 4 to 4.5 years old. Okay. Now we're going to save some of it as well for older, different offerings, but that flagship bottle, the Chicken Cock Kentucky Straight Whiskey, that's why that's the bottle it's going into. And that's kind of why it's a no age statement on it.
Yeah.
So it has to at least be 4 years old, as you stated. Right. So now this product, and what we continue to do until 2022 at least, until our product becomes of age and properly matured. Part of my responsibilities is also go out and try to locate good quality whiskey that we can put under the Chicken Cock name to kind of bridge that gap until ours becomes available.
So can you tell me, is there a specific mash bill on this, or is it a blend that
It's a blend. Actually, it's a blend. There's some product, and again, I've got to be careful what I say, because I like being transparent, and we typically are with everything we do. But
yeah, only what you can talk about, of course.
On these, so I really can't tell you a whole heck of a lot. I can tell you that it was a combination of a mash bill. There was a 74, 18-8. Of course, they're both rye bourbons.
Mm-hmm.
It was the older bourbon, and it was pretty old stuff. The younger bourbon was 78, 12, 10. And so, the 78, 12, 10, it was okay, but to me, it was missing something. So that's when we had some of this older bourbon. I decided to blend it with the younger stuff to get a nice balance. It gave it more of the oak lactones that I think it was lacking and missing. And so, it gave it a little bit better body to it, I think, and it's more the better caramel vanilla notes as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's very, gives me all those kind of traditional notes.
It's at least 20%, about 20% of the older bourbon.
Okay, so it's you get a little bit of dried fruit on the nose. You get those caramels and vanillas, and then the same thing. It kind of comes through. What I found interesting is the mouthfeel is really creamy, and it's got that butterscotch and vanilla and some toasted oak in there. So it's really that kind of traditional profile that I think of when I'm I want a really, really good Kentucky bourbon. This is it hits that profile very, very well.
Good. That's what we aim for. So good. I'm glad you like it.
So can you tell us anything about the ages of what's in that bottle, or no?
Yeah, it's I can tell you this: the oldest stuff is at least 12 years old, soon to be 13.
Okay.
Yeah. So it gives you some indication, and it was over 5 years old. So let's say it's somewhere in the 5 to 6 range. The other, but again, it was lacking some elements that I felt we needed to blend to achieve the taste profile we were trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So.
And what kind of size are the batches that you're creating at one time? How many barrels are going into a batch?
Let's see. We did 20. It was about 25 barrels per batch.
Oh wow, that's a pretty small batch.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very cool.
Yeah.
So that's excellent. That's a really tasty bourbon. So I want to talk about this rye, because I think this is a very, very new product for you guys, correct? Just hit the market?
It did. Yeah, it did. Likewise, it's one of those things that we sourced, and so I looked at a number of different ryes, and one of the things I try to do is I just like to go off the smell and the taste. Okay. So many people, unfortunately, today are hooked on the age.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to push you on that, but I was just wondering if there was.
Well, no, but the reason I say that, Chris, is this rye, again, I'll be totally honest with you, and it says it on the label. It's actually, we dumped the barrels that were just shy of 2.5 years old. But if you look by the UPC,
it's 2 years. Yeah. Exactly.
So it was almost 2.5 when the barrels were dumped. But I thought the flavor of it was just out of this world, and it doesn't taste like it'd been aged a lot longer than that to me.
Wow. Yeah, that is not a 2-year-old rye. That's very interesting. I mean, it's got just a really nice. Again, the mouthfeel on these really impressive on this one, and a nice, really bold kind of spiciness all throughout the palate and through the finish. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the mouthfeel, and that's one of the things in the comments in my sensory analysis that I made. I mean, it almost tastes like it was, you added a little glycerin to it to give it that mouthfeel. But of course, you can't add glycerin to it. But
Yeah.
it really has a nice creamy mouthfeel to it, and the complexity of the aromas and the flavors. I mean, I get some nice pepper and a little cinnamon and just. But then on the finish, I mean, again, it's just the complexity is fabulous. And now both these are both actually bottled at 90 proof too. So
yes, 90 proof.
A little bit higher proof as opposed to say 80 or 86. I think the 90 actually is ideal proof for both these products.
That's really amazing. I was just looking here at, someone had a good question, Greg. I wanted to see, oh yeah, I wanted to ask you about this too. I'll just put up the question. In time, do you have an average age that you're kind of targeting for these two products? Like, is there ever going to be a point where you put an age statement on there, or just in your mind, you want to have X number of years in the bottle?
I think for the core brand, to supply the core brand, we're going to probably evaluate it. And if everything turns out the way it should turn out with, the selection of the barrels and optimizing the flavors in the barrels, I think that's going to have some fantastic flavor, like I said, at the 4.5-year-old. However, me personally, I get asked the question, well, what's your ideal age?
Yeah.
And again, that's kind of a loaded question because there's so many other variables that impact that as far as, where was it stored in the warehouse? What type of warehouse was it stored in? So there's a lot of other variables that can impact that. But historically, I like in the 8 to 12-year range. If you get much older than 8 or 12 years old, I think that the wood flavors kind of start to overtake the sweeter and some of the more desirable flavors. And I don't like drinking liquid oak, but I've tasted some products that are kind of hinging that way,
Yeah, for sure.
So in that range. Now, with the chicken cock, especially with this latest one, again, it's going to be at least 2024 before we even consider bottling that.
Yeah.
The one that we hand selected the wood and the barrel. So I'm hoping, and we're kind of discussing it right now, that we can do some barrel picks with that one early on before it actually becomes of age. And
wow, very cool.
I sample them at least every 6 months to see how they're progressing. And what we laid down in August and what we laid down, or August of 2018, what we laid down in February of 2019, they're progressing extremely well. I'm tickled to death. So pleased with the way they're moving forward. So
that's great. So I wanted to talk about these bottles just real quick. I don't know if people can see them, but there is this really cool, like honeycomb pattern on the bottles.
Yep.
And of course, like, it's a really cool label. But this kind of pattern on the bottle kind of harkens back to some of the old designs from the brand back in the day, kind of tying it back to the origins of the brand.
That's correct. That is actually a replica of one of the old bottles, the pre-prohibition bottles. We have another bottle, and I don't know if you've seen that one yet, Chris. We did some of our limited offerings on.
Yeah, like a spider web kind of design.
It's called a starburst pattern, but it's embossed glass. It looks like starburst, but then it's got the metal. I call it a jigger cap on it, the old jigger cap, where you can actually unscrew it and use it as a shot glass if you want.
Yeah.
But this one here, it's actually called a honeycomb pattern. But when you look at it, it's chicken wire.
You're right. Yes, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wow, I did not make that connection. I just thought honeycomb, but yeah, that's pretty cool.
Both the bottles that we're currently using, they're replicas of an old pre-prohibition chicken cock bottles.
Oh, that's really, really cool. Well, Greg, we only get an hour on here, so we're butting up against that hour, and I don't want to take up a ton of your time as it is, but I really want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing the story about yourself, about the brand, and again, that masterclass in the barrels. You don't know how much I was geeking out on that, and so many people commenting about how cool that was. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining me tonight. It was really, really nice to talk to you. All of us will be following the brand and following you and seeing what happens as you guys go along, and really excited about it. And I hope I can get you to come back on again somewhere down the line as you guys continue to grow here.
Yeah, I'd love to, Chris. I mean, we just barely scratched the surface of things tonight, but
Seriously.
you know, it'd be my pleasure, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Gregg, again, thank you. Have a great night. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris.
All right, you take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining. What a wonderful interview with Gregg. Until next time, this is Chris, the Urban Bourbonist. Cheers, everybody.